Have you ever said, I want to have an unconditionally loving relationship with you? Because if you haven't asked people for the number one thing that you really need for your happiness.
Welcome to Landmark Difference Makers, where we interview people making a remarkable difference around the world. Get ready to be inspired. Let's jump in.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Seamus Ford, and I want to welcome you to Landmark Difference Makers. Today, we're going to be interviewing Stefan Deutsch, who is the founder of Global Human Development, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing mental and emotional well-being through education and research. For over 30 years, Stefan has explored the power of unconditional love as an essential nourishment for human growth. His work supports individuals, families, and organizations in fostering healthy relationships, reducing stress, and enhancing overall well-being. Today, we're going to dive into how global human development is transforming lives and how Stefan's insights connect with the transformational conversations at Landmark. Stefan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel like it's an honor.
It's an honor here too. So Stefan, my first question, and just really for everybody's benefit, is why don't you just tell us a little bit about global human development and how it started?
Um, well, uh, it started. I planned to become an astrophysicist for a number of reasons. I went to a school called Brooklyn Technical High School, which was one of the top 10 in the nation back then, and studied science, engineering, physics, all of that. And I didn't like the work environment that I projected I would have to live in, and switched to philosophy. So my BA is in philosophy. I started teaching for the New York City Board of Education, children that challenged with, back then we called them children with retarded mental development. And during that period, I got no support from the Board of Education to make any difference. And I saw that NYU had a program in their psychology department called movement therapy. I know there was art therapy, music therapy, movement therapy. So I went into movement because the kids that I was dealing with, you would never know on the street that there was any challenge. They were bright and witty, and they love to move. They love to dance and play sports and everything. So I went into that program, and then during that time, I became I guess, very curious about lifespan, this experience we have from birth to death, and we're reading what people had to say about that, and then also human development. So, uh,
Well, here's a question.
yeah.
What does love have to do with human development?
Well, I don't think we thought very much uh, with human development. When I read through human development, the focus was basically having to do with the physical development and the mental development of human beings. So n nobody really wrote anything about what love has to do with human development. And I didn't even think about love at that point in my own education and research and stuff like that. Um, I founded a number of organizations. One was called Creative Aging, and we were about 30 years ahead of time when I did that with Johanna Vandenberg, uh, and uh, and then I founded Impact on Hunger, and that came out of my association and work with the Hunger Project. Um, so I produced 5 shows at the Copacabana, and we had almost all of the Broadway shows there. Jeff Bridges, Judith Light, Stephanie Mills from The Wiz, etc., etc. Um,
And for
and
people listening, just for their benefit, the Hunger Project was something that was around for, well, it's still around, but it really got a foothold in the late 70s and 80s, and it was a bold commitment on the part of primarily people who've done the S training to end hunger by the end of the 20th century. And um, it led to many people being inspired to take on something really, really big, including you.
Yes, yes, that's actually what happened. The idea, well, my experience at Est was, yeah, literally life-changing, because I had since childhood wanted to make a difference in the world. I wanted to actually fight hate. It was my grandparents were murdered in gas chambers, and aunts and uncles and cousins that I never met, and I just couldn't understand how people could hate so much, and I wanted to do something about that. So when you say love, eventually I got to see that the love was the opposite sort of hate and this kind of violence that still permeates us, right? We still have that amygdala, that survival and fight and whatever uh, instinct. So yeah, in then working with impact on hunger, where we did, as I was saying to you, uh, uh, we worked with the AID, Agency for International Development. They gave us a couple of $100,000 to develop a program for K through 12, including colleges, to educate the American people about the solutions to end world hunger. We had a Nobel Prize winner on our board, Norman Borlaug. We had the owners of the CBS television network, the Paysons, on our board, and we did a lot of things. We enrolled the NBA, and and I wound up being on CNN talking about causes and solutions to ending world hunger. So that was kind of my life, and looking at the images of starvation, children and adults, and we called hunger the silent killer because people got so weak they couldn't even express the pain. They couldn't cry out, type of thing. Um, and just sitting around one day, and I'm saying to myself, there's something about uh, what happens when a person who's very hungry, starving, is given some food, water, versus somebody who isn't. That reminds me of the way we seem to feel when we feel loved and when that's absent in a relationship or in life. And I said, I've never heard anybody talk about love, kind of like food, water, that kind of stuff. Uh, as a matter of fact, I hired two graduate students, and we spent a year going through everything out there that was ever written. And the only thing we came up with, Eric Fromm, a psychologist who wrote The Art of Loving, and in it he has a sentence that says, "Human beings are starved for love." Now, whether he meant it literally or figuratively, he certainly didn't expound on, what he meant by that. Uh, but obviously, as a psychologist, he noticed something. He obviously well, brilliant psychologist, but he noticed this relationship we have with love. And it seemed to make sense to me when I heard that. I started to think about why our response to love seems to nourish us, like energize us. It warms us. We have a physiological experience when we're with people who are loving towards us. Initially, I called it nice behaviors and not nice behavior, respectful and disrespectful, and appreciative and not appreciative. And it just seemed to me that there is a reason parents say to their children, "I love you," and it has nothing to do with romance. And all these movies and songs and everything, they somehow have to do with "I fell in love with you," but we love our children, family members, and it's not sensual, sexual. Uh, Back then, it wasn't clarified like it is today that that romantic experience has to do with dopamine, adrenaline, pheromones. It's biological, and it has to do with procreation, and we're species. And so, and we talk about love, the Subaru, why you love a Subaru, what does it have to do with love? But I also noticed that we use it in a family environment, especially with our kids. We love our kids so much, and nothing to do with sex. It's something genuine. And then my physics background led me to say, well, I have this visceral experience and to something out there, and it must mean that there is some kind of real exchange instead of some invisible, non-existent mental, creation. I feel it. I feel it. I feel energized. I feel warm. I feel much better when people are really nice to me, loving to me. And I feel kind of empty and hurt and whatever. And right? So physics tells us, for every action, there's a reaction, right? So here is the reaction. Where is the action? Somebody hits you, it hurts. Somebody hugs you, feels good. But it could be a mother talking to a son in Afghanistan in the war, and the last thing they say to each other is, "I love you, mom," "I love you, Jack," whatever the name is. And we feel it. We actually feel it. So I said, no, no, no. The physics tells me that there's something real going on here. We can't experience unreal. It has to
Yeah.
be real just because we don't see it. And the analogy is that we never seen sound. You don't see sound. What you're experiencing is intentioned energy. I want to communicate something to you, and I generate the energy, and you're capable of making sense of that energy that I generated. Same thing. If I'm being respectful with you, appreciative with you, it's an energy, it's intention behavior, and you're able to sense it and make sense of it. And we label it and we say to somebody, thank you for appreciating, being so appreciative, or, whatever it is. We have labels: respectful, patient, supportive, empathetic, compassionate, understand. We have names just like we have for, dairy and meat, and,
Right.
you know,
Well,
yeah,
one of the questions that this provokes for me is you started this in the it's over 30 years ago,
70s.
and so over 50 years ago. And I look at the kind of during my lifetime, which has spanned a lot of that time. And I remember a time where, in American society, people didn't hug, and male friends would not say, I love you to each other.
Right.
And, social customs are always changing and they're always kind of evolving. But, if I look for myself and my own experience, because I say I love you to my male friends, that I don't want that not to be known. And I actually, stopped and looked. That is actually what I experienced. You talk about, family members, your children, and I love my,
Right.
love my
Right.
daughter like nobody's business, my godsons. Um, and I'm wondering if there's a recognition of what you've been talking about that's happened in society.
Uh, uh, Kind of, sort of. Okay. Because what I've been seeing the last 5, 10 years is a lot of, self-love. You need to love yourself, which was a no-no. Back in the 70s, if the minute some behavior seemed like somebody was loving themselves, it always had a negative connotation. We're supposed to love other people and not, be involved, self-involved, and all that kinds of stuff. So but the problem with self-love is when people say it and it sounds good, and I should love myself more, but people don't yet have the tools. It hasn't been developed The tools haven't been developed. The realization, it hasn't been put out there in an educational way so people can begin to see that what is actually happening is something versus nothing.
Well, let's explore a little bit more the something.
Sure.
Um, because if I understand, your full premise, you're arguing that love is something that exists outside of individual people's personal experience, like in the
It's an
context of
energy
physics
we can we can
exchange.
generate. We can, yeah, we can exchange, we can generate. We certainly know when we're receiving it, uh, because we are energized. Yes.
And that would that so if let's kind of stand on that premise. Then people relate to love in a kind of a commoditized way. And what I mean by that is that there's degrees of love that you will extend out to people. They'll use dating for an example. I've been
Hmm.
married a long time, but I remember there was, I like you, I really like you, I am not sure if I'm
Hmm.
ready to say it yet, and then I love you. And
Yeah.
that was sort of being cautious and not wanting to like um take responsibility for everything that comes with saying I love
Hmm.
you to in a romantic context.
Hmm.
um but I'm in preparing for our conversation. One of the things that I was thinking a great deal about is that social media and constant media has a tendency to have us kind of make other people abstract. You talked about the human suffering of starvation in a very intimate way. I mean, like the actual physical experience of it, people can't actually say their pain because they're so weak. We hear things all the time in the news about other people's suffering, whether it's Gaza, whether it's the Ukraine, whether it's
Hmm.
Yemen, Ethiopia, virtually any place on the planet. There's human suffering going on, and we have compassion when it's right in front of us, and lesser degrees of compassion the further away it is, unless somebody really, really puts it in front of us. Um, what is that phenomenon? With people and our kind of quantifying this experience of love, this exchange of energy, as you're saying.
I think it's an interesting question that you're posing to me. It's not something that many people have asked, but when I look at it from my perspective, it's kind of like you may uh, be in a situation where you have some gum, let's say, and you say to somebody, would you like, a piece or something like that? And then there's other situations where you actually invite people into your house and you shop and you cook and you serve and then you wash the dishes. So that's, there are different levels of the way we interact with people and or feel about people. You feel warmer, closer. You want people to maybe be in your life. You uh, yeah, you've developed a relationship
Well,
with them. Yeah.
I'm getting, sorry, what I'm getting at is
Yeah.
the self-regulation regarding the experience.
Well,
Um,
because culture has defined certain things, and so, like you said, we want to be careful before we say to somebody, "I love you," but we're never careful when we say it to our children because it's a different thing. I think that we instinctively know that a human being needs love. I believe that we're born into a unconditionally loving bubble. And what I mean by that is the parents, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, close family friends. We know how to behave around the child, and it's loving and it's unconditional. We'll get on the floor, with an toddler. We'll play with them, smile with them, tickle them, hug them, kiss them. Listen, I'm a little older. Toddlerhood is behind me, but I wouldn't mind somebody hugging me and kissing me and playing with me and smiling at me. And I need it just as much as that infant. But
Well,
then, well, there come this the terrible twos when a human being has will, starts to see themselves as a separate, from, and says no. And in our world, parents who grow up, and it's most of us, feeling that they don't really have control over their lives. They have a little control, maybe here and there, but not much control over their lives, which makes us frustrated, and various different emotions come up, you know. Uh, and then there is a 3-year-old who doesn't listen, and parents can't tolerate that. They love this child, but we also want to have something we can control, because we can't control our lives. There's constantly things happening in life that we can't control. Grandparents die. Sometimes parents die. Sometimes we get fired. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's that. It is what it is. And so why do we surround an infant with this unconditional love? Because we know it instinctively that that's what they need. And the fact of the matter is, all of us need exactly that love for the rest of our lives.
I have had an experience often actually where I've had a total stranger in various contexts say I love you to me,
Mm,
and I paused for a moment and I said, well, no, I love you back, and I say I love you.
mhm,
And I'm looking at, I don't think that's an uncommon experience. I'm not, tooting a horn here or anything. I think that people have had that experience, and it, and maybe it goes back, the common thread here is the Landmark Forum. And one of the things that I personally got out of doing the Landmark Forum is I love people, and it's really okay
mhm,
to
mhm,
express that.
mhm,
Like, I don't have to hide from
mhm,
it. I don't have to have
mhm,
conditions on it, as you're saying.
mhm, mhm,
And the most recent time it happened to me, it was a person that was homeless, and we had a conversation, um, and I gave them some of the money that I had, and they said I love you, and I just kind of paused, and I'm sharing this because I want to see your perspective. Um, the thoughts that went through my head were, well, I'm never going to see this person again. Um, I don't want anything from them. But yeah, and it's kind of moving, I want them to know that they are loved.
mhm.
And my question pertains to our desire to have other people know that we love them. It's the
I,
opposite.
I, I,
There's the need and the desire that we all have to be loved, but
well, I'm
I
gonna I'm gonna answer you.
please.
I'm gonna answer you. Okay. And that is that uh my theory is love is essential nourishment, like air, food, and water. That's the theory. Research has caught up with it. Maybe we'll get to it a little bit later. The names like Luby and Hendricks and so on and so forth. Uh, but the point is this: once you understand that love is nourishment, then the next step is to take a look at how we interact with the other nourishments, to figure out how we could or should be interacting with this nourishment, if in fact it is. And the way we interact with air, for instance, is not only do we need it, but what else do we need? We need to exhale. I know it can
Okay.
be a trick question. I can give you all the Himalayan oxygen, in the world, but if you can't exhale, you actually die.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can have all the healthy food you want in the world, but if you can't expel, you die. And again, same with water. So nourishment is cyclical, and if that cycle is broken anywhere, you die.
Mm.
We need to love as much as we need love. We need to love. It's a need we have. That's what happens with the infant, and then we become afraid because culture and society doesn't approve us uh, saying to strangers, I love you, type of thing. But what you did in that moment is, yeah, you felt something for another human being, you acted on that, and they got it. The money was just a side issue that, but they actually got that energy that led to you taking from your pocket and actually giving them something. They got that.
Yeah, well, and the more satisfying and fulfilling part of that whole encounter was actually saying, I love you.
There you go, because I'm sure they don't hear it very often, right?
I don't think so, no.
Right.
Um, well, let's now that you've kind of given the premise about love as nourishment, how does global human development foster that?
Well, it's something very simple. I'm also a therapist and I have clients. And very often when they come to me and I tell them that what we're going to do is we're going to catch you up on some stuff that was left out of your development, your parenting, because your parents didn't know, and that love is nourishment, and you're going to learn how to love yourself. That's the important thing that's missing. We make human beings self-sufficient when it comes to air, food, and water. Obviously, we don't have to do it with air. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. But if you can't breathe on your own, there's an iron lung and other ways of helping people to have oxygen. People become children become self-sufficient, but we never become self-sufficient loving ourselves, even though we keep hearing, love yourself, self-love, love yourself. It's all over the place, which is great, except it's also frustrating because if you don't explain to people that it's not about being selfish and self-centered, which is really the way people who don't have enough love behave to kind of make up for the lack of love that they feel like they didn't deserve. They deserved more love. Uh, so self-sufficiency is very, very important. And so that's where we start. You're here. We've fallen out of love. I mean, that's what I hear. I work with couples mostly, families, large groups, but uh, in my practice, it's mostly couples. I love it. We have a program called Saving a Marriage Saves a Family, and I love what it does for the children. And to me, that's more of the focus than two adults. But the point is that unconditional bubble that we experience, and we're then looking for it. We're looking for it since we're not taught how to love ourselves. We're always looking for it outside of ourselves, friends and people and whatever, to get some of this. We know something is missing and we need it. And I mean, what is suicide really about in depression? If it's not about the fact that we don't feel loved and we don't feel the world even cares, whether we exist or we don't exist.
Mm.
So the the point here is that I call it the toxic cocktail, puberty, and then we have dopamine and adrenaline. We have the hormones that have to do with procreation, and then we see somebody we're very attracted to and everything, and they turn out uh, uh, to be also nice people, and people we have something in common with. Obviously, we're attracted to them. We work very hard when we're physically attracted to be very nice. So all of a sudden, you're experiencing this new wave of excitement, biologically speaking. But at the same time, when people, especially when they first meet and they first start to date, they're very nice, they're supportive, they're understanding, they're not critical. All the things that we need, all the behaviors that generate what we would call nice or loving behavior. So boom, we have both of those things. But once we kind of signed on the dotted line, right? We have like the honeymoon period. Even before that, a lot of these engagements break off because now you have somebody and you went to bed with them or whatever it is. So now you don't have to work at the relationship as hard. And you think you've fallen out of love. I tell them it's not jello. It's not something you fall into and you fall out of. You behaved a certain way and then you stop behaving that certain way. So let's go back. What aren't you getting from her? Well, she doesn't appreciate the fact that I'm 9 to 5 and da 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 da. And when I come home, she attacks me with the kids, whatever it is. Okay, so uh, did you hear her? Yes, he needs to be. What about? Well, he doesn't respect me. He thinks that I'm home and blah blah whatever it is, and that's easy somehow. And okay, so and then for a week they're they become aware of their behavior, the lack of appreciation, the lack of respect, and then from there we go to other behaviors and other behaviors, and the next thing you know is they're behaving more consciously in a more aware way and in a sense more lovingly. They're generating in a conscious way this energy that initially brought them together, and that all of a sudden makes the sex better and the intimacy and this and that, and bam, we just saved a bunch of kids from a divorce, which is why I like working with couples.
That's great. Um, Another question I have for you is related to kind of the times we find ourselves in, and I'll use America, although I know it exists, in a lot of places, is this sense of division that people experience in public life. This kind of
Mm-hmm.
binary
Sure,
paradigm that we find ourselves in. You're
sure.
you're either for that or you're against that, and um, and I know a lot of people struggle with um, that the people they love view things differently than them politically. We'll just use that, and they really struggle with it. They struggle
Right,
with their disagreement. They struggle with
right,
withholding themselves from the
right.
people that they find themselves disagreeing with. And if you apply this idea of love as nourishment to where we find ourselves in public life, how do you think it comes into play? And
Yeah.
if you really were going to use that idea to bridge the gap
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
experience
Mm-hmm.
with other people,
Mm-hmm.
how would you do that?
Yeah. I hate I hate to I I am tempted not to go down and not to even answer that, to be honest, because it is a political kind of, and it has unfortunately uh, uh, uh,
Well, can you answer the question in a way that's
yeah,
politically
well, I'm
agnostic?
going to answer, but
Okay.
I'm just saying I'm really reticent. I just don't want anybody. I want you to uh, hear me from the perspective that I look through it through my rose-colored glasses, and that love is is always part of some part of this. So look, we're human beings. We're not very conscious. I mean, the new word, it used to be awareness and being present, and now it's mindfulness. It's all the same BS, if you want to say it, because you're selling whatever. You're selling books and group meetings and all that side. But anyway, um, we're we're not we're generally not very aware human beings as a group. I'm generalizing. We're not very aware, and 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 we don't understand. I'll give you an example, and this will help. I took a course when I was in college. It was Black Panther time, and it was, the power to the blacks and everything. And we had a black teacher that they hired just for that, and uh, 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 a bunch of us. I was certainly very interested in what she had to say, and I was, for black people not being enslaved and all of that kinds of stuff, mistreated, and so I took her course, and she taught us all of the prejudices, all of the ways that blacks are isolated and in ghettos, and all this kinds of stuff. And she said, I mean, when you have a black kid who does some violent crime, you need to understand that it's his environment, and all that kinds of stuff. There's no jobs out there for them, etc., etc. And he says, yeah, yeah, I mean, black power, you're right, and we need to be more compassionate and understanding. Uh, and then I said to myself, by the way, I got an incomplete in her course at the end. She was so pissed at me. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. So I'm just I still remember it as funny. It just occurred to me that people that she was calling rednecks, the kind of South white, uh, 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 and prejudiced and all that kinds of stuff, that those children also grew up in a ghetto. They also grew up in a ghetto. So that if they're racist and whatever they are, it seemed to me that uh, we need to understand them at least, as much as understand the black kids who grew up in the ghetto. and, and I made the unwise decision of voicing that opinion in her class, and I thought, she was going to tear her hair out and maybe my hair out. But the only way she could really tell me how unpleased she was with it. That's where we are. What I'm saying is, if we have a hard time looking at other human beings. We have this walk a mile in another person's shoes type of stuff. And I think that there is a group of people, I don't mean the rich now who just have their own agenda. Obviously, they want to be the princes and the dukes and the kings of America, or any place in the world. Um, but we the more educated class, the more whatever you want to call it, middle class, upper middle class, East Coast, West Coast, whatever you want to call it, we behaved actually very unlovingly with that part of America that wasn't that educated, make jokes about their marrying their sister or their cousin and everything like that. It was We were being very unloving, and
Well, the thing I hear in what you're saying, you use the the well-known metaphor, or I don't know if it's a metaphor or analogy or just a saying.
mm-hmm,
Uh, walk a mile in my
mm-hmm,
shoes before you judge me, or walk a mile in another person's shoes before you judge
right.
them. That um, human beings, we all generally respond similarly in similar situations. And if we
Mm-hmm,
really take time to understand the situation that a human being that is uh, very relatable to us in the most fundamental way, we take time to really get a sense of their experience, we can have patience and compassion with them.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Yes, and I think that's what happened in this country, and people took advantage of it, and they, divide and conquer, and it works. It works. That's why that phrase also came because it works. You divide and you conquer. You make people afraid, and divide them, and then you can do whatever.
A lot of things work in the short term that don't work in the long run.
Oh, well, that's a different story, and it's a
Well, I
culmination of that.
I wonder if it is it's not new. It occurs new for us living today, but you talk about divide, conquer, all those kinds of things. I mean, a lot of the paradigms that, we're experiencing today have played out over the course of human history.
Sure,
Uh,
absolutely.
there's a great expression about love that is totally escaping me, but the gist of it is that there's kind of nothing new under the sun. The people are just as wise 2,000 years ago about love as they are today. It's there's something about there are people, not
Oh,
in general,
okay.
but just there are people that have written well and knowledgeably about it. Um, but what I'm trying to say with that is that there's love is a universal experience of human beings,
Right.
and that we if we start relating to it as an element,
Mm-hmm.
just like air and
Mm-hmm.
water and food, that we might see other people differently in that paradigm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can tell you that the people that I've worked with, and I work with thousands, very large groups, and then also individuals and families, that yeah, the minute you begin to understand that somebody's probably love deprived through no fault of their own, uh, because it's also you, Usually you're looking out there, but it applies to you just as much as it applies to everybody else. And then we get to understand some of their behavior. Now, the most important thing is to make people start to become aware of the way they treat themselves, because out of that awareness, you start to become aware of how you treat other people. You look at their reaction and you say, "What are you, nuts? I didn't say anything. I didn't say that. I didn't do this." Da 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 da. You know, amygdala, fight or flight. I mean, that's our two choices. We have a hippocampus, and as Luby's research shows, unless mothers are very nurturing, i.e., loving, with their children, which not everybody is, unfortunately, uh, that the hippocampus doesn't develop. So it's not there to be used to look at one's behavior and whatever. So that's our work is make people more aware, give them permission to love themselves so they understand why it's not a selfish, self-centered, egotistical act any more than if you're hungry and you go to the refrigerator. I always do that with large groups. What do you do when you're hungry? I said, well, I go to the refrigerator. I said, why don't you feed the world first? I mean, why should you eat and other people, and they kind of like stare at me. But yeah, we- it is a matter of becoming aware that it is. And so that's shifts the paradigm completely. And all these romantic movies and Bachelor and Bachelorette, and uh, you get married just by silly stuff on television that people watch primarily because they don't know that they got it all wrong. And what they're showing you is just something that will confuse the messages your body and other human beings are giving you. You haven't been able to see them and organize that stuff and then understand that. And it's fairly simple.
Well, with the time that we have, I have two final questions. One is if you could put into a sentence what you want for other people.
Oh, okay. Uh, 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 what I want for other people is for them to learn how to love themselves and others unconditionally.
Mm,
And that's the vision. That's the vision.
mm,
You know, a lot of times when I use the word unconditional, people, yeah, you can't ask people to love you unconditionally. You can, that's nobody can do that. And they have various things because most of us haven't really experienced unconditional love the way we did when we were infants. Um, but the point is that until Dorothy stepped on the yellow brick road, she had no chance to get home. So we have to step on the yellow brick road. We
mm.
have to start with becoming aware of our behavior with ourselves.
Yeah,
That's the hardest.
yeah,
That's the hardest is to become. And where I start, and this is for all your listeners, is take a piece of paper and write down all the lovable qualities you have, the things that you really like about yourself. You have permission. It's not an egotistical
mm,
exercise. It's just to make you more mindful, more aware. And then as you do that, and you make lists for other people, and you give it to them, and you get into this conversation, and it also makes it easier to take the criticism because then
yeah.
you can hear it, I'm sorry, maybe I am selfish sometimes. I'm glad you mentioned it, so next time that I behave that way, just let me know. Let me know, and I'm going to work on that.
Mm,
Otherwise, we're in defense mode, which
that's
is what
great.
we are most of the time. We're defending, defending, defending.
Here's my last question.
Sure.
100 years from now, you won't be here. I won't be here.
Really? I'm counting on my son-in-law,
Yeah,
he's a laryncologist. Maybe he'll come up with some. I'm kidding.
um, what do you want people to say about you when you're gone?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't, I don't, I don't really want him to say anything about me. I just want him to be happy, live your life,
Mm,
be loving, ask for love. I did a clinical trial at Danbury Hospital in Connecticut with doctors, nurses, and residents who were really a lot of burnout and suicidal ideation, addiction, typical things, so much stress. And in the beginning, they resisted the whole idea that, love was, because that's in their estimation, soft science and or silly, uh, cotton candy stuff. But they came around, and so one of the questions I asked them, and I will ask all the people who are listening, is how many people in your life, including you, Seamus, have you ever said, I want to have an unconditionally loving relationship with you? Because if you haven't asked people for the number one thing that you really need for your happiness.
mm,
I mean, we're afraid of asking. I mean, nobody asks us. So obviously the culture doesn't encourage, that question. But we should ask ourselves, how come I don't say that to somebody? I want you to love, I want to have an unconditionally loving relationship. And if somebody says that's impossible, then, well, that's our North Star. Let's aim for that. And so that way we can judge our own behavior. Was
mm.
that loving what I just did or said? If I see somebody, jerking away or turning their back on us or something.
Stefan, I really appreciate your time and I really appreciate this conversation.
I appreciate it too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Landmark Difference Makers. If you're inspired by what you heard and you want to learn more about Landmark's programs or explore upcoming episodes, visit landmarkforumnews.com. to find resources, event details, and more stories of people making extraordinary impact around the globe. If you are already a part of the Landmark community, check out the Landmark subscription, designed to provide ongoing support in creating a life you love. Visit landmarkworldwide.com to learn more. Until next time, keep creating, keep contributing, and keep making a difference.